RPGs have a tendency to reuse established mechanics, which is why I'm always intrigued when developers create new systems within the genre. Throw in a captivating story and you have a makings of an RPG that will have my attention. The Revenant Prince by Nomina Games has both of these elements. While I would have liked to see a bit more explored within the established features, it provides an undeniably unique gameplay experience. The Revenant Prince introduces players to Troy, a soldier in the Lumerian Empire. The Empire's goal is to unite the world under one rule. Commonly, this is executed by militant means. It's learned that Troy struggles not only with his own conscience, but a strange sense of deja vu that he can't shake. During the narrative, a disembodied voice accompanies Troy's quest and attempts to influence his actions as he searches for answers. This creates a dynamic within the story where it's up to you to listen to this voice or forge your own path. To say more about the plot would probably be an injustice to the story, as it's best experienced rather than spoiled. Early on, you're given a chance to experience a moral dilemma presented throughout the game, where you spare your enemies or eliminate them after a battle. This changes the course of the narrative depending on the choice you make. Almost all characters give you this opportunity, leading to a range of branching paths. Although I'm certain major plot points remain consistent. It's not a new element by any means, but it's an engaging one, and a fun way to keep you wondering if you're making the right decisions. Combat is where things get even more interesting. Battles take place in active time encounters, forcing you to think and act quickly. You are given 3 weapon slots that you can switch between. Each action exhausts BP, which is represented in a bar that doubles as a way you could see which actions you can use. Each weapon has 3 moves. On top of this, weapons and items have a cooldown gauge on your strike buttons to prevent you from spamming them. Each weapon has different moves, attributes, BP usage, and cooldown to consider. You first begin with a melee weapon, a long-range weapon, and a defensive shield. As you acquire more weapons, you can customize your equipment a bit more to your liking. I found this shield to be extremely important to surviving tougher battles. When facing off against a group of enemies, you can easily be knocked out with 2 hits if you aren't guarding yourself. This calls for speedy timing and a close attention to your enemy's gauges as well as your own. Although it may feel overwhelming at first, once you get into a groove of how to approach battles, things become more manageable. There are also a few items that can revive you to make early deaths less daunting. Still, even if you don't, you are given the option to retry the battle from the start instead of returning to a save point. As frequently as I died early on, this was extremely helpful, and made me eager to jump into the battle again and again. Each of these systems combined leads to some pretty enjoyable battles. Unfortunately, there wasn't as much variety to the monsters and enemies as I hoped. I found myself fighting many of the same enemies over and over. Battles can tend to be a bit on the long side, some take a while to chip away at, and while I understand this for tougher bosses, it becomes tedious when it happens so often. Luckily, the responsiveness of the battle system does make this more comfortable to work with, but I think some balances would have helped improve the overall experience. Another element to help ease any tedium is the adjustment encounter rate item you get early on. This super helpful item is something I used several times throughout my journey. The Revenant Prince gives you a couple different ways to earn experience. You gain levels like most RPGs, but you can also add to your sphere grid, which can be customized by either adding to offense, defense, or utility. Each orb in your sphere grid requires SGP, which you obtain through battle. You are also able to upgrade your weapons and your armor at the blacksmith. Rare items are needed for each upgrade, so you'll want to make sure your base weapon or armor is decent to start with. Even with a good deal of grinding, I didn't get many chances to upgrade these items, so I found myself hoarding them until particularly tricky areas. Moving around is exceptionally speedy, as Troy can really book it if you want him to. I wish a lot of other RPGs could have you zoom around as quickly as this. In combination with the various warp points, it's pretty easy to get around the world. Even though the Revenant Prince has some intense dark themes, many of the characters I spoke with had fun and quirky personalities. The overall story is fairly compelling as well, although I unintentionally missed a good portion of it just by chance. This is good and bad, I suppose, as it's a title that seems to ask for multiple playthroughs. The Revenant Prince has many of the core elements that makes a compelling RPG, with an intense battle system and a mysterious story. Still, there's a noticeable amount of refinement that could have made the experience more approachable and user-friendly. Shaping the adventure based on player choice offers a sense of immersion in this dark world, and I was gladly along for the ride. Noisy Pixel gives The Revenant Prince a 7.5 out of 10. Thank you so much for watching. Noisy Pixel is run by a group of gamers who work hard to bring you news, reviews, previews, and more. Please subscribe to keep up with all our future content.